Alright, so in this video I'm going to be talking about rhythm, which is also a big part of what your homework and your test is going to have. And so here I've written out a couple of things and I'm just going to go over them to have a quick video. So here what I've written out for you is the rhythm of each note. And so here we're talking about duration. Remember, duration equals rhythm. So I have a quarter note here, which is going to equal 1 beat. I have an eighth note, which is going to equal half of a beat. And then I have a 16th note over here, which is going to equal a quarter. So if you look here below, a quarter note is going to equal 2 eighth notes, which would also equal 4 16th notes, okay? And then an eighth note is going to equal 2 16th notes. So make sure when you put the 16th notes there, you have 2 beams, like you see here. And most of the time, you're going to have 2 16th notes beamed together. It's not very typical for a 16th note to be alone. Then if you look up here, we have a half note here, which is open note head, and a whole note, which is also open note head. So the half note is going to equal 2 beats, and the whole note is going to equal 4 beats, okay? And then we'll get to the dot later. So if you see up here, I have a staff and I have a treble clef here. So one thing that we are going to talk about is you have something called the key signature, which we're going to talk about in Unit 2, which has to do with pitches. And then you also have something called a time signature, which has to do with the meter we're talking about here, okay? So underneath, you're going to have these numbers here. The only time signatures I really want you to learn are 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, and 6/8. So what these mean is the bottom number means that is the note that gets 1 beat. So if there is a 4 underneath, that means that the quarter note gets 1 beat. If there's a 4 underneath. If there's an 8 underneath, that means that the 8th note gets 1 beat, okay? And then the top number means how many you need in a measure in order to fill out that measure. So that's something I'm going to look for on your composition projects, is if you do that correctly. So if you look here, a measure is a bar that divides the music, okay? So that you can group music and it's easy to read. So here I've decided to put us in 4/4, which means that a quarter note is going to get 1 beat. So if this means a quarter note is going to get 1 beat, the top number 4 means that there needs to be 4 beats in each measure. So here I show, this is a way that you could do that because we have 4 quarter notes, okay? So each measure needs to equal 4 quarter notes. That's why a whole note is here, because that equals 4 quarter notes. You could do 2 half notes. Here we have 8 eighth notes, because remember an eighth note is half of a quarter note, so therefore we would need twice as many as we need over here. One thing you'll notice here is that these eighth notes are beamed together. Typically you're going to beam based on the beat. So you want everything that is 1 beat to be beamed together. A quarter note obviously doesn't need a beaming, but 8th and 16th notes need to be beamed. So the way you would do that is, let's say we have an 8th note and 2 16ths, okay? That equals 1 beat because this is half a beat, right? And then we have 2 quarters, so that would equal a whole beat. Instead of it looking like that, you need to beam these together like that, okay? That's one of the weird beamings. The other ones are pretty simple, like for example, if we have 4 16th notes, right, they're all going to be beamed together, and then the 2 8th notes are going to be beamed together. Okay, so you beam based on the beat, okay? Each 1 beat gets beamed together. Now, when we're talking about 6/8, it's a little bit different. So like we said, when 8 is on the bottom, the 8th note gets 1 beat, okay? The 6 means that there needs to be 6 eighth notes in each measure. So here I've already put 3, and we'll make 3 more. and then you would put a measure line. So when you're doing this, you're going to put 3 eighth notes together. That's how it's typically beamed. So this is something called compound meter because it can be divided 2 different ways. So the way that it's typically divided is you have 3 beats together and then 3 beats together. And remember, those beats are going to be eighth notes, not quarter notes, not this, but eighth notes, okay? So when you beam these together, you're always going to beam 3 together. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is this dot over here. You see how I have a dotted quarter? If we were in 4/4 time, this would equal 1.5 because you're adding half of the value of the note to the note. If you are in 6/8, this would equal 3 beats. Because let's think about that, okay? A quarter note is going to equal 2 eighth notes. So if I add a dot, that means that now it's 3 eighth notes. Do you see how that would be 1.5 technically? Well, when you're in 6/8, the eighth note is getting the beat. So therefore, it's 3 beats. All right?